Notably, I've seen YouTubers like Donkey get out of their comfort zones, like when Donkey himself stopped being a games critic and decided to start his own game publisher, which I rather hope to see succeed. Other notable cases like Jem Stephanie Sterling have got out of their comfort zone of being a games journalist to be a completely unrelated thing as a professional wrestler, and notably, I'd also like to see that succeed. I'll tell you, however, what doesn't really deserve to succeed, and it better stay in its goddamn lane. Underthemayo passing from Doom Eternal to reviewing other games, because, oh boy, if this guy doesn't get a goddamn thing right. Now, there's apparently a bit more expose videos on Underthemayo so far. I don't want to be yet another one of the bunch. Instead, I'm going to focus mainly on why sometimes it's better to stay in your lane if you got no basic knowledge in the other lane you're passing into, like the case of Underthemayo. Now, to say Underthemayo has really bad misinformed shit takes on video games that are in Doom Eternal is a bit of a well-known fact, and what he is a bit of a hypocrite too, and has a tendency of angrily clapping back at people who disagree with him. Basically, he has the same ill-tempered wit than someone like Major Orlean in regards to the Doom community. The fact that he has to bring every minutious nitpick out of any game just to appear unbiased or have any resemblance of good taste is not just ignorant, to say the least, but also petty and elitist. Take this review of Ultrakill for example. Yes, I don't necessarily not like New Blood as a publisher for personal reasons, but I do think Ultrakill is a good game. That I need to say it requires a bit of a higher skill to play. Here in this case, he demands a certain progress in the game where he gets constantly rewarded for actually progressing in the game.
After V2, the game goes back to being pretty easy to pass with a runaway charge pistol spam, and I just don't agree with this kind of structure. If you think it's fine, well, okay. I know there's plenty of people who enjoy freestyling in a vacuum, but I don't want to feel like the skillful play is just occasionally demanded here and there and sprung on me out of nowhere. I want a game that makes me feel like I'm leveling up due to the escalating challenging nature of the level design and AI.
But when facing anything that isn't an FPS, or rather more specifically Doom Eternal like Elden Ring, he has to contradict himself in this statement.
Yeah, I know, but I don't want to run around grinding, fighting all the other enemies because I find it's really boring. I don't want to just grind. This is why I don't like open world RPGs.
Mayo, it was your choice playing Elden Ring on a stream. Not the viewers, not mine, but yours. No one forced you to do it. No one took advantage of your mental condition or anything to somewhat force you to do it even. You're a normal adult. Let's just face it out of the bat, Underthemayo is a Doom Eternal or Doom YouTuber who couldn't find any additional content to these games of origin. Now he has to rely on other games that are even outside of his particular taste, except that isn't true, because in regards of Doom, at least classic Doom, there's still an ongoing flow of content that you can make, especially if you look into the Doom modding or mapping community that still creates content to this day. The journey of a YouTuber is one of renewing itself or dying. It is a constant chase to see with the course of time what works best in a particular current time period and sticking to it for a while. Leafy is a kind of content creator that did Minecraft Let's Plays before moving on to his successful commentary formula that will inevitably lead his demise. Donkey stopped doing League of Legends to move on to be a games critic and then a games publisher. The flow of time just shows different coming trends and formulas that work for that particular period of time. Doom Eternal already sailed with the end of the Ancient Gods Part 2 DLC, and rarely we see any updates in regards to new Doom game releases or similar from Doom id Software or Bethesda. So notably Underthemayo, since he's very specifically a Doom Eternal player, even though he's made classic Doom content before as far as I know, he's pretty much thinking of moving to greener pastures since he ran out of content there. The problem with Underthemayo specifically is that he has no fucking idea of what he's talking about in regards of other games that are not Doom Eternal. So bottom line, he ends up contradicting himself in various videos. He ends up saying misinformed stuff. He ends up unnecessarily nitpicking games just for the sake of it. For what I care, Doom Eternal might be the only game he might like at this point from a critic's perspective, because as far as I'm aware, he didn't even say much of a negative thing about that game. This kind of thing reminds me of when Phil moved on from competitive Street Fighter clumsily into making Let's Plays. It's a similar kind of ego where you have to justify your nitpicking by saying you're either a truth bomb or either a true intellectual of sorts. Phil has this sort of inflated ego when he nitpicks games he plays because he feels like he's the voice of reason amongst a sea of people who constantly hate him for some reason. Underthemayo feels like his nitpicking is justified on other games that are in Doom Eternal or Doom because he has the same sort of inflated ego. An ego that he has probably built not only due to his immense success covering Doom Eternal and his content, but also due to his skill in the same game. And this ego drives him to commit a bunch of narrative atrocities in regards to the games he reviews. This, I need to remind you, is the guy who yelled at Scale Up for complaining at the Marauder in a Get Good fashion. And let's be honest here, the Marauder fucking sucks. Not because the Marauder in Doom Eternal is just too hard for any normal person, but because he's placed the same way the Archviles are placed in Plutonia, but worse, as some sort of troll attempted mini-boss that lately gets spammed, and especially in the latest Doom Eternal releases, and finding it, unless you know a certain particular exploit which the majority of Doom Eternal players like Mayo seem to abuse, is basically dead time. This digressions aside, it needs to be pointed out that most of Mayo's opinions on other games can be disregarded as they're just opinions. But here's the whole ordeal. It's one thing to have an opinion, and it's another to have a misinformed hater opinion based on the very little you know about a particular game. It's very noticeable that Underthemayo in its Elden Ring coverage, or even in his Ultrakill coverage, or in his God of War coverage, hasn't really understood fully how these games work. In fact, it seems like he does a series of first impressions on games without fully grasping the game's experience, often barely playing the games he reviews. If that's the case, he shouldn't be calling these videos reviews. It's just first impressions, but the problem here is that Mayo thinks he's the authority on letting people decide which games to play, and he calls these videos reviews, not just for the clickbaity nature of these sorts of videos, but also for how imperative it sounds, like they were actually based on the full game experience, even when Mayo basically tries to play games ham-fistedly like he was doing a bunch of his Doom Eternal exploits. There's more than just the pistol in Ultrakill. You don't need to constantly charge up the pistol shot in a spammy manner when there's way more weapons than the pistol. You don't need to rush into the main story bosses barely at level 10 in Elden Ring when you can actually explore and level up just a bit more with the tons of optional bosses and encounters that the Elden Ring world offers. Underthemayo barely played Elden Ring for 4 to 5 hours. You wanna know how much more my best friend IRL has played Elden Ring before finally beating every single boss in Elden Ring? Fucking months. My bestie, in comparison, can form more informed opinions on the games he beats, and not just Elden Ring, but also nearly the whole Far Cry series, for instance, because he fully understands how the games work, even if he didn't fully beat any specific game. What I probably mean by this is that if you're not willing to put effort in understanding games outside the usual Doom Eternal or Doom stuff, just stay in your lane. Underthemayo, on his constant pursuit for recreating the success of his Doom Eternal videos, and after running out of Doom Eternal content to make videos for, and therefore by venturing himself into other game genres without barely the effort or experimenting with these sorts of game genres, has just lowered his standards by ending up creating low effort content and losing his credibility as a games critic by being a hater online. The hater attitude on games does not go anywhere. It's not going to make you cool or more likable. It's just going to make you an asshole. So my final advice for Mayo here is to stick in his own lane. Maybe Doom Eternal content has fully run out, but you know, there's a constant flow of classic Doom mods and WADs that you can cover up. Mayo, in fact, I have a monthly series showcasing WADs of all kinds for classic Doom. Maybe you should just probably look into that. Don't fuck it up, please.